If you want to make a small accent groove, a really handy way of doing it is using the Dremel tool with a cutoff wheel set up in a drill press attachment. Then you can get the height just right and cut that nice even groove all the way around the spacer. I gotta get the hand files out though to do the rounded grooves on each side of that small groove. These rounded grooves on the front spacer and pommel are gonna look spectacular once we get this buff to a mere finish. There's a lot of hand sanding to be done first though. We've got to hand sand the handle, hand sand the fittings, hand sand the grooves in the fittings. The guard needs hand sanded. Oh, and there's still more hand sanding to do on the blade too. I want to round over the very corner of the wood since it's a little proud of the front spacer for our museum fit. You wouldn't want to leave that sharp because it just doesn't feel good in your hand. All it takes is a pencil, some files, and a little sandpaper to get a nice radius on the edge of the handle. Be careful not to round that corner over too far though. You'll end up with a little gap between the wood and the metal. Got a little tiny chip or void or some kind of imperfection in the wood right here, and I definitely want to get it filled with some super glue before we move on. The edge of the pommel is a little sharper than I want, so I'm going to take it back over to the Scotch-Brite and round it over just a little bit more. We're moving right along to some finer grits now. I'm using some 1500 grit with WD-40 to help the paper cut longer. A lubricant isn't necessary for the coarser grits because the paper doesn't seem to clog up very fast, but once you get past 1000 grit, the paper seems to fill up with sanding dust immediately after touching the wood. But if you use a little bit of lubrication with it, it'll just cut and cut and cut for a long time. This handle's taken all the way up to 2500 grit, and then I'm going to do a little bit of light buffing with some super fine pink buffing compound. I need to say, just for the record, I think this is the prettiest piece of wood I've ever used. I love the deep, dark blue color, and then it's got all these little hints of yellow. It reminds me of Van Gogh's Starry Night. Just a little more sanding to do on the fittings and they'll be ready for buffing too. There's also a little more sanding to do on the blade. I want the main bevels to have a 600 grit satin finish, and then I'm going to use some 1500 grit on accent areas just to give it a little shine and draw your eye, like on the clip, the spine, and under the ricasso. Might as well go ahead and sharpen this knife before we assemble it, and that way I don't have to worry about scratching the highly polished handle or fittings while I'm working on it. You can see I've also got most of the blade taped off, and that's just so I don't scratch the blade while I'm sharpening it either. I rough the edge in to get that burr started. Then I go to the finer side of the stone. I'll leather strope for a little bit. And then a butcher's rod to finish it up. It will shave. It's time to make like the Avengers and assemble. This buoy is finished. I am so happy with it. I know